Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Today we have YouAttest and we have H2Cyber, and we're going to talk about our new identity pen test. Introductions. So first we have Paul. He's our founder and CEO at H2Cyber. He's a former CISO, a cybersecurity expert, as well as a former special agent with the Air Force. We also have Kelly Gillmore. He's our SVP of Information Security at Change Lending. So he's an information security, privacy, and compliance consultant. He has more than 25 years of experience in the areas of IT, information cybersecurity, identity access management, as well as public and private cloud systems, infrastructure, data privacy, and compliance. And then, of course, we have Garrett. He's our CEO here at YouAttest. 25 plus years of IT security product creation. He has over 15 US patents for information security products. The focus is on application SSO, two-factor authentication, identity assurance, continuous authentication, AI, and blockchain. So I also worked with him over at SecureAuth, which he created. He's the co-founder and inventor. He also created revolutionary products such as Silence Persona, Silence BlackBerry. And so currently he's with YouAttest, which is an application SSO-based IGA tool. The agenda for today. So I already went over the introductions. We're going to talk about the problems with identity for a secure enterprise, how it's mandated by compliance measures. We're going to talk real-world examples. So what are the problems with orphaned accounts? We, of course, are going to give what YouAttest is, an overview, as well as a live demo, and then a live Q&A. I'm going to pass it over to Paul now, and he's going to talk about the problems with identity for a secure enterprise.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. So serving as a vCISO for several companies, obviously, you're privy and knowledgeable of all the access reviews that are going on. So therefore, you obviously see a lot of the problems that occur within access control across the organization as it bleeds from the security department to technology and compliance and whatnot. But some of the main areas and problems that we see are the lack of an identity store of record. So where's your centralized mechanism for identities? You know, maybe that is Active Directory on premise, maybe that's Azure in the cloud, maybe that's Okta. You know, you're going to have some type of identity store of record in most cases, but a lot of times that's not identified in organizations, nor are they using it to centrally control and leverage everything. The lack of third-party applications leveraging that primary authentication mechanism. So a fair amount of organizations will use various third-party products. They'll have their separate independent authentication and access, but that's not really tied back to the identity store of record. So let's say I have my login to my computer that's controlled through Active Directory, but then I have some web-based service that has its own username and password. Well, those are not tied to one another. Accounts not being disabled and deleted on time. And again, that goes back to just the fundamental case of not tying everything together for provisioning, deprovisioning, or even having accountability of it in general to know when I leave the organization that not only my local access is removed, all the subsequent access that I have in the various SaaS platforms are also deleted and done on time. And then finally, that's when accounts are reviewed, in a lot of cases, the roles that are associated from a role-based access control standpoint are not. So if you have various roles that are set up in your organization, like general user, administrator, super user, and whatnot, typically the individual is reviewed and not the actual roles to make sure the roles have the appropriate permission levels that you're assigning and leveraging from a role-based access control standpoint. So those are some of the common problems that I see in the vCISO space. Let's go ahead to the next slide real quick, Ashley. Now, while I mentioned a lot of those problems, probably the biggest problem that I see in organizations, and this is probably why you're here today, is just the lack of a tool to do your access reviews. So on the screen here, we have an Excel icon and an Outlook icon. This is primarily the main way that if access reviews are being done, this is typically how I see them being performed. They're done on spreadsheets, and a lot of different spreadsheets. Those are then put into and emailed around from an Outlook perspective to various people for approvals, and you're constantly having to keep up with those people and hounding everybody for, hey, I need you to approve this, I need you to review these, make sure these people have the appropriate levels of access. And then you're getting flooded with documents in return. So revisioning history is, everything is off. And basically what that it comes down to is a lot of time and effort is put into it. There's a lot of, errors, 4 + 2 = 5, meaning just from all the various spreadsheets that are going back and forth, and it's human in nature and it's all manual. So obviously there's errors are prone everywhere. And it's just very frustrating and from the person that's keeping up with the access control in the organization. It's very frustrating. That's what I see most commonly if access reviews are done. They're done in this fashion, and it doesn't scale. Then that's pretty much what I have on the problems from what we see in the vCISO world. I'll pass it back to you, Ashley.
So if you could talk a little bit about how it's mandated by compliance measures.
Yes. So as an organization, whatever vertical you're in, maybe you're in critical infrastructure, maybe you're in finance or defense or some other vertical. I don't care really what vertical you're in. If you're in a regulated environment or industry, you probably have compliance requirements. And most of those requirements say, hey, leverage some type of framework or pick some type of framework or call it out specifically. But in most cases, all those frameworks do call out the need to perform access reviews to some form or fashion. And those are internal access, so your employees, your contractors, temp workers, everything like that, as well as the SaaS access for your business, and same things, partners, affiliates, employees, which we previously touched on, all those SaaS-based applications that you're using as an organization that you're creating accounts in. You obviously need to keep up with those as well. Now, the types of requirements that are mentioned in these frameworks, and frameworks, for instance, could be CMMC, HIPAA, New York DFS if you're in financial services. If you're in the insurance space, you have Louisiana Department of Insurance, as well as all the other ones that are contained within the MDL 668. But if you look at them and break them down, there's a lot of different things that are called out in a lot of these different requirements. Access reviews, which we just talked about. Inventory of accounts. Well, in most cases, when you're performing access reviews, you're performing an inventory of accounts. Inventory of authentication systems. What are all the authentication systems out there? On-premise Active Directory. You have all the SaaS-based applications. So it's identifying and inventorying all those in addition to it. Disabling accounts. And then you have removing and disabling inactive accounts. So most people will put the account into inactive, but then forget to circle back and actually disable it or delete it. Delete it. And then reviewing the system roles within those various platforms. Those are all requirements that are mentioned within frameworks, but they all roll up to access control.
Thank you, Paul. Mm-hmm. Now Kelly is going to go over the real world problems of orphaned accounts.
Hello, everyone. As Ashley just said, I'm going to discuss real world problems around orphaned accounts. Excuse me, and also going to provide some other things to consider regarding what can be done to identify and mitigate these specific problems. Sorry, I have a bit of a frog here, so please bear with me. But to start with, what I want to do here is kind of define what an orphaned account is, because it seems obvious, but just to be specific, an orphaned account can be any identity store of record, account or application service account that does not have an active user association, meaning the account might exist, but the user is no longer in the organization. So this, of course, can be former, separated, terminated employee accounts, specifically that were not properly deprovisioned. They can also be former employee service accounts, cloud service accounts, or even application accounts, such as Box, Salesforce, ShareFile, GitHub, DocuSign, Adobe, SAP, Concur, Paycom, dozens and dozens of other applications that are out there that an employee may have created an account for using perhaps the company's email address, but that are not tied directly back into the ISoR. So those types of accounts can be considered orphaned accounts. You also have other cloud directories, Amazon Web Services, Google Suite. Those are also something to be considered in this space as well. Generally, these don't include accounts that are centrally managed, or directory integrated, federated applications and services, but they can definitely add up very quickly and cause great problems. So really, what are these problems? I've outlined a few here in the slide. If we go to the next slide there. Thank you, Ashley. So what are these problems? So if you think of it this way, identity is the new security boundary. Like we've heard this phrase for a long time now. It seems that this was a new concept starting in the early 2000s. I recall Garrett and I talking about this very early on in the 2000s. Well, I say mid 2000s. Let's go there. But they call it a new security boundary, but I don't really consider it that new. But the truth is, your users' identities, current and former, are very common and highly sought after target for cyber criminals. They attack the path of least resistance, or that which provides the highest likelihood of success and with low risk and upfront costs, generally. Even in their most recent lapsus attacks, they claim to have paid a current employee of a large computer manufacturer for their credential, leading to the breach. The access an account has to resources is incredibly important, and I think that really makes that stand out. Now just imagine if a disgruntled former employee were approached offering cash for credentials and their account were still active. It's wrong in every way, but it can, and unfortunately, therefore, could likely happen. But this is all afforded to an attacker because of inappropriate access. Orphaned accounts can give access to information such as application credentials, email mailboxes, sensitive data, customer data all exist in those external applications, inside mailboxes. Even intellectual property could be at risk when someone is given or someone gains access, inappropriate access. This can also give an attacker an initial foothold into your organization to do reconnaissance and move laterally. Or an attacker can also use information gained in future social engineering, phishing, or even impersonation attack campaigns. So that kind of falls into, an orphaned account can actually increase your attack surface. Orphaned accounts actually become weaker and more vulnerable the longer those exist in a uncompleted deprovisioned state. The longer the orphaned account exists, the lower the likelihood it will meet your latest security best practices, making that potentially easier to guess or even crack. New vulnerabilities are found every day, and faster computers force us to improve our standards and defenses. Orphaned accounts don't have an active user that would be forced to update passwords or meet newer standards. Therefore, it does broaden and increase your attack surface. Now, as you look at orphaned accounts, there are other negatives and problems associated with operational costs, things you don't always think about. If you have an orphaned account and you're paying for a license for an application, say Adobe or Salesforce, or even something like Citrix ShareFile, those costs can actually add up very quickly. In addition to operational costs, there's resources, specifically applications or processes may be running using an orphaned credential that could be chewing up bandwidth, disk space, CPU time, other things associated to that, which are all chargeable items in Amazon, Google, Azure, cloud hosting environment. So, it's not an obvious, oh yeah, I realize those types of costs could be associated with these types of accounts, but they can. So that is also a problem associated with it. And of course, there's always penalties and fines that are associated with data breaches. And I won't go into any detail there. There are plenty of examples of costs of a breach out in the news and other media. The thing that comes to mind to me more than anything specifically here is just reputational damage. And to me, that's should always be a major concern to be considered as a motivator to up your game from an information security perspective. So what can be done? What are some of the things that you can do? And I live by this rule: don't commit unforced errors. Know what you got. You need to maintain proper administrative controls. In order to maintain those controls, you do this by knowing what's in your environment. If you don't know what's out there, you can't protect it. And that really means that you need to maintain a tracking system. You need to track your assets. And this needs to include all on-premise and cloud directories, as well as all application services, and those accounts associated with it. That has to be tracked in order for you to protect it. Other things you can do, of course, right off the bat, is take advantage of technology. SSO and Federation in particular is one of my favorites. So deploying an identity and access management technology solution wherever possible. Federated identities, ADFS, Okta, OneLogon, Duo Security, etc. Use these in the organization to reduce logins to one set of centrally managed credentials, which improves enterprise security. Again, the obvious beauty of that is if I disable an account ISoR, account is effectively unusable. The next topic there, what can we do? Follow consistent provisioning procedures. This is probably one of the biggest areas that you can make great gains very quickly, is by making sure that you can manage user identities by documenting your deprovisioning procedures and review them regularly. Managing identities, user identities in any organization can be a challenge. In a perfect enterprise world, identities are all managed in a tightly controlled, highly protected identity store of record. But with the complexities of today's environments, especially enterprise environments, we most likely don't have that luxury. So by documenting your deprovisioning procedures and reviewing them regularly, you'll be more successful at identifying orphaned accounts and removing the access that those accounts may have, therefore protecting your enterprise and organization. Additionally, and I think it was mentioned earlier, Paul, complete scheduled account and access review audits. This can't be overemphasized. The only efficient way to identify orphaned accounts and to cut off inappropriate access is to conduct user account audits. That is pretty much the rule. You can make these audits more effective by including access reviews, understand and document those, specifically resources and account access, understanding the business purpose for each resource. But the most important piece to that is audit your identity store of record regularly, audit your on-premise and cloud directories regularly, and audit your applications and cloud services regularly in order to make sure that you are, again, not committing an unforced error. Okay, so the last but not least, you want to use tools that, of course, minimize access review time and effort. We're all here on a YouAttest webinar, so clearly you understand the importance of using effective tools. But the goal of your tools should be very basic, but we want to eliminate time and risk due to labor-intensive manual processes, improve data reliability and quality. That is a key element there. Reducing risk of errors caused by manual data handling. As Paul mentioned, if you're emailing Excel spreadsheets around, you're risking not only getting it done quickly and the amount of resources that it takes, but you're really risking data quality there. You want to be able to track who reviewed what and take action, including reminders to ensure on-time completion. And then you want to be able to ensure the compliance of your user access rights with an audit trail and a detailed history of user reviews that can, again, be presented to auditors if you're in an audited environment. But those are my suggestions with respect to the problems associated with orphaned accounts.
Hey, Kelly, this is Paul. I'd like to interject there just on the access reviews and the time and effort and, from the access review standpoint and tying it back to the frameworks. So a lot of the frameworks will call out from a frequency perspective. It'll just say periodically, perform them periodically or whatever. So in most cases, that can be interpreted a variety of different ways, but maybe that is by quarterly access reviews. One thing I would like to point out is the YouAttest platform allows you to continue doing the reviews even if you wanted to do them monthly versus, let's just say your process was set up for quarterly access reviews. Well, that's a full 100% review of all access. But the beauty of the YouAttest tool, by using smarter, more efficient things, in the 2 months gap that if you were set up for a quarterly access review, the YouAttest allows you to see only net new changes. So you don't need to do 100% physical review during those down months per se. You can only see what was added, like what was added, what was removed, what was deleted. So a very quick insight into your organization in the months, if you were on a quarterly cycle, those 2 months that are remaining, you can easily see what's changed and have a better overview for when the next full review is actually going to occur. I just wanted to interject that right there, just based off of the, using tools to your advantage. And the YouAttest tool, just like Kelly said, you're here for a reason, and it must be a pain point today. And it's just an additional way to help you with the pain that you're currently facing.
Excellent point, Paul. Yes, absolutely.
All right. Thank you both. So now we're going to switch it over to Garrett, and he's going to talk about our new identity pen test.
Thanks. And first of all, audience, big round of applause for Kelly and Paul. First of all, these are industry leaders and industry practitioners. Paul's a VC, so he goes from job to job and helps enterprises remediate their security, identity, and network practices around security, especially to compliance. And my friend Kelly knows a little about identity, given that we built a product from scratch and spent 8 years together side by side, leading a team and with the great assistance of people like Ashley. So my friend Kelly knows identity. Fantastic. Let's talk the YouAttest Identity Pen Test. Peter Seppi, our CRO, will tell the pricing. So first, open up our minds to the problem and how we technically solve it. The problem, as Kelly and Paul both elucidated, is these nasty orphan accounts. Now, nothing is better than the wonderful world of single sign-on, identity stores, IDASs, but what we really see in this world is, even though we're doing pretty good job of access reviews on those, and I mean with this tool, and then the kludgy ways that enterprises try to do it elsewise, the real problem comes in that not the identity stores connected to the identity store record, but those siloed ones. And those become a real problem because, as Kelly elucidated, those become orphan accounts that hackers do what hackers really want to do: stay persistent. Remember, if you're doing all this effort and you went on your affiliated network and you just bought a really nice piece of attacker vector, the last thing you want to do is be discovered that day. You want to stay on, and they say now it's anywhere between 73 days to 3/4. People stay on, and one of the best ways to stay on is to take over an orphan account. Therefore, next slide. What we've done at YouAttest, and this is what Paul was talking about, is we enable your team and yourself to conduct these access reviews regularly by taking the massive amount of workload off of you and quantifying it. We ingest the identity store record, be it your AD on-premise, your Azure AD, your Okta, and now we have that. And then what we do is we also ingest the information that of the users from these siloed accounts. Next slide, because I'll put it in graphical form and then we'll do a demo on this. This is your world. This is what literally one of my favorite quotes was from a meeting 2 days ago. I explained this, and then we had Kasia follow me with the demo. And I asked the gentleman who had 7 million accounts that he was wrestling with, is this a problem for you? This being on the left-hand side, your identity store record is reasonably well managed. You got users, you got groups, you got roles. But on the right-hand side, you've got all of these apps which aren't connected, that some department put some users in, and then, we don't have them grouped or role mapped. And he said, Garrett, that's not my problem. That's the industry's problem. This is how we solve it. And then we'll show you the demo, and you'll come on and do a POC with us, and you'll be happy. Next slide.
I was going to say, Garrett, can I interject here real quick?
100%, Paul.
One thing real quickly, because I'm actually just going to tee up a question.
Yeah.
The audience probably is thinking this. So, Garrett, where do we start with the siloed apps that we have? Well, a good rule of thumb is actually, looking at your central store, but then when you bridge out into your SaaS-based applications and all the other ones that are out there, look at your business continuity plan. In most cases,
Nice.
You've already previously identified critical assets or critical resources or services. And that'll actually should probably be where you start from and work outward towards that and all the other third-party applications that you have. Because if you've already identified them as critical in your business continuity, then they're critical to your business operations. So that's where you would probably want to start. I'm sure some of our audience probably has, was thinking that in their heads of like, well, where do I start, Garrett? Where we have 1,000, SaaS-based applications, where do we start? Typically, that's where you'll start, and you'll move outward from there.
I love it. Well, and this next slide shows this strategy right here. So here we go. We ingested identities to our record, and as Paul has elucidated, the right way to do this is you start there, do your access reviews, get your identities in order. And what I mean in order is, and I have a voice in my head from one of my favorite auditors, Raj Sawani, who's probably on this webinar right now, who says, well, we have to group our users in some logical fashion. That's what Paul just said. Do that in your identity store of record. And then that groupings of roles needs to be enforced in the other applications. And here's what I say enforce. It doesn't matter if it's connected to the identity store of records. You still can enforce it by ensuring that the users in those groups in the identity store are enforcing there. But your problem is, and this is a you problem in the industry, is how do you know that the users I have in Finance App 1, Finance App 2, Finance App 3, even if they're not connected, are in the right groupings? That's what we solve with YouAttest and YouAttest Pen Test. We allow you to understand the groupings by automatically, by ingesting that, and then by doing those siloed accounts. That's the problem we solve. Oh, and before we jump into demo, that's where we're going next, keep those questions coming. The second part of this webinar is going to be a lot of fun because I'm looking at some of the questions, and we should have a lot of good open discussion between Paul, Kelly, and the other team members. Go for it. Let's jump into the demo.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing, and Kashif, go ahead and show it live.
Sure. Greetings, everyone. Just let me go ahead and share my screen.
So what the demo will do, and while you're we'll take an identity store record with to be a ISoR AD, and then we exported some user data from a siloed app, and we'll call that Finance 1. And then we can show you how we enumerate the identities and then determine whether those users are actually in the identity store record and then in the right groupings.
Great. So Ashley, can you see my screen?
100%.
Yes.
We see you.
Perfect.
Right. So this is the dashboard. It looks simple as it is, actually. But first, let me give you a quick overview of how YouAttest makes these access reviews painless so that it's easier for the audience to understand how the identity pen test would work. So in the console, you'll notice two types of audits here. One is called auto audits, where you can integrate the tool with your main identity store of record. For example, it could be ISoR, it could be Okta, it could be anything else. And it's all here under auto audits, where you can create these campaigns, application audits, groups, and user audits. And then the other one we call it any resource or CSV module, where you have you can create audits for your siloed applications that are not connected to your main identity store. However, YouAttest enables you to correlate the user data from these siloed applications to what's there in your main identity store of record, so to see if a user from that application exists in the logical groupings inside your identity store of record. So if there is, for example, a finance application, as Garrett mentioned, and it's not synced with your identity store, and you would like to see if the users that have access to that application are also part of the finance group inside your identity store of record, YouAttest enables you to see that. The functionality in both these audits, auto audits where the integration is working, and the any resource audit without any integration for the siloed apps, the functionality is essentially the same. So let me just quickly go over an audit just to show you how the audit process works when you are inside an audit. Here I have created an application audit since I'm integrated with ISoR AD. It listed down all the applications, so I chose just 3 of those, and told the system that I want to do the access review for 3 of these applications. So bring me the users and their profile into YouAttest so I could just decide whether I would like to revoke access, certify access, or I would like to delegate these users to appropriate people within the organization. So here you see I have selected 3 applications here, one naming YouAttest, my app, and there's another one, probably 2 are showing up right here on this page. but the information I get here for every particular user is his manager, who he reports to within the organization, what's his role, his job title, his status, whether it's active or inactive, or if there's any short description for that role, it will come up here as well. It's just the metadata that YouAttest is getting from your identity store of record. So once you have this data, now the functionality allows you to either certify the access if you are okay with it, or revoke access for this user. And when you're doing that, the information that's popping up on the subsequent columns really helps you, show it to your auditors, internal or external, that you have been following the right process. It shows you what action was taken, who took that action, but most importantly, it gives you the timestamp of exactly when and what time was that action taken by that person. And as an admin, you can see the progress here once you delegate it out to people who are maybe business unit managers, or these users report to him. As they progress into the attestation, you are seeing the progress over here in the console. So this is basically how the tool works. At the end, the gist of the tool, the gist of the whole process is basically your report, which you can generate either in form of a PDF, an Excel, or a CSV if you want to, slice and dice the data and make it more presentable, and then show it to your auditors. Now, the same way when it comes to CSV or any resource audit, where you will get the user data in form of a CSV, and you will upload it into YouAttest, even though that siloed resource is not connected to your identity store of record. But once you do that, over here, it will give you two options. Either you can create an audit or a campaign, just like we saw in case of application audit. It's essentially the same. Or the second option is to generate a pen test report, where the system will take all the user data from your siloed resource and match it to your identity store of record and see if that user exists in their in their logical groupings or not. So once you do that, on the next screen, you're going to see the options where if you have, for example, identity store of record is Okta, or your identity store of record is Azure AD, or it's an on-prem AD, it will let you choose the source identity store of record. And then we have two matching criteria. One is the user matching, where you can tell the system to match certain email or a username to an email and username inside your identity store of record, and bring back the results in form of whether that user is active on both sides, on your siloed app and your identity store of record, or that user is active in the siloed app, but it's inactive inside your identity store of record, or the user does not exist, or he's active on both sides. So these kind of results, you can email it out to anyone within the organization or any email ID, and the result is going to be a CSV file, the data that is going to fetch from your identity store of record against your against the data you have from your siloed application or siloed resource.
Let me just pause right here, because here's the deliverable. Here's what both the risk managers, the CISOs, and the externals need. They need this report. They need this report that says, listen, we have identities in this siloed app, and they're not even in the Active Directory, or they're not in the right group. And that takes a lot of time, and it's error prone. That's what Paul and Kelly can tell you. When you start doing this stuff manually, it is error prone. And this is what we automatically do with the product, one after the other. Keep going, Kashif. Thank you.
Yep. And as you can see, the sample that I have, the first user, it says it exists on both sides, but it's inactive in both resources, and it's active in the identity store of record. So you need to decide, what do you want to do with this resource or with this ID? The second one exists on both sides, and it's active. So it's obvious that it exists in your identity store in the logical grouping. So you can stay there. But the last two, The data for these two users is not available inside your identity store of record, but they do exist on your siloed app. So these are actually the orphan accounts that you should be concerned about more than the first one who's inactive, which could be for any reason. But you need to look into all three of them just to see what you want to do with these orphan accounts. Plus, when this is on a user level, but you can also have it on a group matching level where you want the system to find if whether these people exist inside your identity store in the logical grouping for that application. For example, if we have a finance app that these users are part of, but that app is not connected to your identity store, but there is a finance group inside of that identity store that this member or these users should be part of. So the system will fetch that information for you once you select the group matching criteria. How? It will bring back if these users are part of the selected groups, which you will select on this stage here. For example, if I select the finance app, it will tell me if that app exists inside the identity store, and then you can email that report out, and the report will show you whether or not these users exist inside of that group in your identity store. Now, in this case, this is inactive, the first user. It's available in all groups, but it's inactive. The second one is active in all the groups, but the last two, they're not found in the finance group that we have inside the identity store. In this case, it's ISoR on my tenant. So these are your orphan accounts that you should be concerned about. You can easily filter these out, get rid of the all the rest of the data where it says active, and just go and select the not available pieces, and you can have your orphan account that way, and generate the report and let the team know or IT department know how to deal with them. Great.
Got it. All right. Let's get to the next part where Peter will tell us how you can utilize this tool and start using the identity pen test and move forward.
Yeah, so we do a one-time report, which shows the.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Pasha, can you? Perfect. Thank you. 1 second. Sorry, Peter. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we do a one-time report that shows the orphaned accounts in the siloed apps. We do that, like Paul said, for the most mission-critical apps first, and then we can do additional apps. But that really allows you to go in and eliminate those orphaned accounts. That's a requirement that a lot of people have mentioned to us. So that's why we're doing the identity pen testing. Then on an ongoing basis, like we talked about earlier on the call, we can do it for access reviews, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, to continue to make sure that the identities are correct. And that's the identity governance part of it that needs to be done for best practices and also for the compliance mandates as well. So on that basis, we price the product at $2 per user per month. But the initial identity pen test helps you identify those orphaned accounts, gets those orphaned accounts out of the siloed apps. It's a great place to start. It's a place to start that a lot of people have requested of us. And once you do that, you have the full access to the YouAttest tenant to see if the other features that are in the tenant can help you with some of these other processes. So it gives you the ability to try out some of the other features that the product has to offer as well. And we do that for an initial period of 30 days with this identity pen test. And again, that report on the orphaned accounts is a flat fee of $5,000.
Very clean. All right, Ashley, I saw a bunch of questions coming. Why don't we jump into that?
Of course. Okay, so Paul and Kelly, I have a question for you. What are some of the fines or penalties for not adhering to the best practices for identity security?
I'll let Kelly go ahead and answer.
I'm sorry, my hotel audio kind of cut on me there. Could you repeat the question, Ashley?
Of course. What are some of the fines or penalties for not adhering to best practices for identity security?
Well, as I said, there's lots of examples out there. Some of the things that come to mind, for me are going to be like CCPA and fines related to loss of privacy data. I believe it's per occurrence, $775 per record. And if you've got 1 million users, clearly that can add up very, very quickly. Other areas, as far as that CCPA goes, I know I've talked to legal about a few of these. I can't seem to bring them, recall them right at the moment, but beyond, some of the biggest areas that actually concern me and I know my company are actually around reputational damage. And although that's not a fee or a fine, there is a massive cost associated to that if you have a significant breach.
And Kelly, just to add on that, we talked about it a little bit earlier. So those fines are material, right, to the enterprise, but what's even more material most times is the reputational damage that can occur when one of these hacks happens, or when this process isn't done cleanly. Is that fair to say? Is that kind of reiterating what you're saying there?
Yes, it is. Exactly. Yes, it is.
Yeah, and you have to look at his Okta and SolarWinds stock price.
Yeah, in most cases, a lot of the breaches, when a breach does happen, it just highlights the areas within your organization that maybe weren't done to the level at which they needed to be done. And in most cases, in order for some bad person to do something, they have to have something, and they have to have a credential or an account to do something in most cases. So that's why really access controls are really incredibly fundamental in helping you prevent breaches overall, because I have to have an identity as a bad person to do something really. And, as long as you're doing those reviews, making sure, now obviously there's other things that go into it, an access review, making sure that, that is the right person logging in and coming from the right location, conditional access and everything. But fundamentally, if I'm a bad person trying to break into an organization, I'm going to try to find an orphaned account because I don't want to draw attention to me. Some accounts that's disabled that no one should have been in the first place, I'm going to enable it, and I'm just going to use that person's password, or I'm going to create a brand new account that I can get into in the event you kick me out. I want another way to come back in and maintain my access from a persistence standpoint. So that's why access reviews are really critical in the breach mitigation hierarchy, per se.
Perfect.
Yeah, Paul, once they get one of those credentials too, it's very hard to detect them too. When you say as they get in and do that, it becomes a more difficult thing.
Yeah, and that's just security is defense in depth, and there's other elements and logs and reviewing logs and everything else. But fundamentally, the very first thing I need is access, and I need a user ID and I need a password, or some type of anonymous access, or whatever the case might be. But I have to have the capability to do it in the first place.
Perfect. So I know Garrett and I hear this a lot in our calls. We have a lot of people that want to do this, but big question is of course money. So what opens up the budget for automation tools for security and compliance? And this is either for Kelly or Paul.
Probably both.
Well, I think me and Kelly are going to be in 100% alignment to this answer. So,
yes, I believe we are. My personal answer to that would be nothing opens up a pocketbook faster than an incident, security incident, ransomware, breach.
couldn't agree more.
It's a sad situation to have to go through such a thing. But there, with every bad, there's good, right? Got to look for the silver lining. If you go through such a thing, management will come to you in an effort to make sure that never happens again. And those budgets tend to open up.
Yeah, prevention is always going to cost less than the cure, just fundamentally. So, $5,000 to do an identity pen test on your ecosystem today, I can assure you is far less than you going through an event, because in most cases, if you go through an event, you're going to notify your cyber insurance carrier. Well, you're going to have a deductible come into play there automatically out of the gate. Then your premium might be increased. And then there's regulatory notifications that you may or may not have to, notify, extend to customers. Then your brand can be impacted, because if you have to notify customers that are your customers and offer them credit monitoring, they could choose to take their services elsewhere. They might no longer be a client of yours. They're going to go to your competitor from a customer standpoint as an organization. So it just doesn't equate. I mean, in most cases, security is a cost avoidance tool. It's going to avoid the organization from spending and incurring money when it doesn't have to. It's reducing risk. It's not that, hey, I'm going to put this in place and the CEO is going to say, oh, this is going to make us this amount of much more money. That doesn't occur in most cases in the security world.
Yeah, additionally, there's the aspect of it that you don't think about right away is when you go to renew your cyber insurance and you've had an incident, that effort and the resources required to get that to get that reinstated or renewed increases almost exponentially as well. So it's an expensive endeavor, especially in the cyber insurance side of the house.
Perfect. Peter, we have a question from our audience. Are access reviews part of the pen test?
Well, the pen test is more focused on the orphaned accounts. So the request has been, okay, we have these siloed apps. We know we have orphaned accounts. Let's clean that up first. That's the problem we want to solve. The best practice, like Paul and Kelly mentioned earlier, is to regularly do the access review. So the product handles both. What we're doing with the identity pen test is solving the orphaned account problem, giving you that report so you can go clean that up. And the access review, though, is something that should be done as a best practice for cybersecurity, but then also for compliance mandates as well on an ongoing basis. So
the identity pen, Peter, the identity pen test can be done in a much faster process, and really the starting point if you're not doing anything today, like Peter mentioned.
Yeah, so, that's a great point. So speaking to that, as Paul mentioned, we can do that like within a week, within 5 business days. So we can get that done quickly, and that provides a nice value add. And then ongoing, you can use the product for your access reviews on an ongoing basis. But that's a really good point. That can be done very quickly, so we can provide an immediate return.
And it doesn't need really any involvement from the business for the most part. Like if you're leveraging the YouAttest platform for actual access reviews, where Kashish was saying, we have approved, delegate, certify. The orphaned accounts approach is we're looking at things that shouldn't be, that are going to pop out and shouldn't be there today. And we can easily remediate those items. We don't really need to get the business involved, which is why it can go really fast and execute. Every process is different from the access review standpoint, but YouAttest makes it very efficient and streamlined within the tool, which is, as you build and go out from the identity pen test if you're not doing anything today.
Right. And I also think that speaks to the ongoing need of identity governance, because you do that identity pen test once. I think you're going to find that there's some things that are there that need to be managed more closely. What that shows is, on an ongoing basis, I need to be really disciplined about doing these access reviews in the right way.
Okay, I have one last quick question. So Peter, what is the ongoing price of YouAttest? So I know you talked about the price of the pen test. However, if someone wants to continue and do the access reviews, how much is YouAttest? Yeah,
okay. So it's $2 per user per month, which we think is a very reasonable price, and that's the list price. We have volume discounts for larger enterprises. This can provide value for a small company of 100 employees, but we also have customers that have multiple thousands of employees as well. So, the product can work in both environments. And it's a very straightforward model. It's $2 per user per month.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I just want to thank everyone for coming today. I want to thank Paul and Kelly for joining us on our webinar today. And thank you. And I hope everyone has a great day.
Right. And I wanted to say thanks very much to Kelly and Paul. The African saying, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village, people, to build a product. And we greatly value the input. I talk to these gentlemen a couple of days a week to get input on the product and what we should do. And the easiest way to become part of this village is to become a customer, because that way Ashley runs our customer services, and then we have quarterly meetings with our customers and say, how do we make your life better? All right. So
100%.
Thanks a lot for everyone's time.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Yes.
Peter. Thanks,
Thank
Peter.
you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.